welcome
Start
to
again.
another episode of Resiliency Rounds with Anish and Jeremy, where we've taken a little bit of a break with the end of the school year for our kids and traveling, and so we're coming back and we're just reflecting on how everything's going in our lives, and we found that we're kind of at this inflection point, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that. So we were in Nicomachean Ethics. We had just finished book six, and before we get into sorry, we finished book five, and we were about to get into book six, which is Practical Wisdom, Phronesis, Phronesis,
Yeah, Phronesis. Pretty good.
Phronesis, yeah, and as we were talking, Anish and I were just joking that I've been in all these rich conversations lately, and so we thought that it would be good to kind of talk about the state of the world. And our question for today, and what we're going to focus on, is how do we navigate the modern uncertainty and complexity of the world around us? That's a big, whopping question. I think it's not necessarily one that we'll have here's a step-by-step guide to how to navigate, but I think we'll be able to kind of address different topics and our thoughts around it, and share some of the conversations and where we're seeing other people at. So yeah, Anish, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think where we could start this conversation is, where we find ourselves today, the issues that surround us. And I think every human being right now who's kind of plugged in to what's happening, both domestically, internationally, what's happening with artificial intelligence, finds themselves weirdly at a place where one cannot decide what does the future hold. And if the future is this kind of uncertain and this complex, how does then one orient oneself? Where do we turn to get advice of what needs to be done next? What I've found is that this uncertainty and this complexity, though modern, right, though contemporary, this state that we are in of uncertainty, of complexity, is not a modern phenomenon. I don't believe it's a modern phenomenon. I think even in our lifetimes, there have been uncertainty. One of the big uncertainties was the advent of social media, how that's going to affect our lives. Prior to that, it was, the dot-com surge. Prior to that, it was the internet. And all of these have kind of happened in our lifetime. The internet probably preceded our lifetime just a little bit. But we've been at the receiving end of that. And at each point of time, I feel like there was uncertainty, ambiguity, obviously a lot of complexity that most people didn't understand. And it has led to the way we live our life today. In not, it's not that we have been able to adapt to it as well as we think we could have adapted to it. What I mean to say by that is, it has brought in a lot of problems, and there are a lot of societal ills today that are related to it. But I feel like that what's happening today has happened before. And I'm sure if you were to go back, every time there has been some sort of a revolution, be it the industrial revolution, the revolution of enlightenment, and all of those things, I think all of those times there was this uncertainty, this complete change in the landscape going forward, a lot of new social ills that came about, and a loss of an old way of life. And humans have persevered through it. Some have done better than others. And I'm not talking in a material sense. I'm talking about in a philosophical, spiritual, grounding sense. Some people have done better than others. And I believe, based on what I have read in the conversations we have had, in the conversations that you are having right now, Jeremy, that what separates people who do well with change and from those who don't do well is not the fact that you are succeeding materially, in the way things are changing for you. That you're not that .com millionaire or now billionaire and now even trillionaire. I think those lives are still fraught with worry, stress, disappointment, anger, bad relationships. The ones who succeed are not necessarily materially better off, but they're philosophically more grounded. And that philosophical grounding or spiritual grounding is not modern. It is, in fact, still an ancient process that humans have been dealing with or understanding or resolving for hundreds of thousands of years.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna pause there and send it back to you, Jeremy. But I would like to hear about these conversations and where are these conversations going in your scale. I know you've mentioned things to me like artificial intelligence. I know that's a big conversation that you are having with folks, and can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, happy to. And what I'm finding, I just want to reflect on what I just heard you share, which is also that the future is always uncertain, and it's always going to be more complex than what we currently think we're experiencing now, because we don't know what it is. And as technology comes in and plays a larger role, as the political environments continue to go up and down and sideways and question or starts to create questions of our own kind of existence, with celebrating 250 years of the United States and yet saying this is still a young country, an early experiment that of democracy that we actually don't know how strong it really is. That
Yeah.
everything's been set up to be a strong system of democracy, and yet only time will tell. And that is uncertainty, right? The future we don't know about. And so over the years of just in our lifetime, just seeing the things that have come into play, and you mentioned the internet, I would say even the iPhone, these things have had dramatic impacts on the human race, and in some that from behavioral change to cognitive decline. And so as we're looking at AI, we're seeing the potential for cognitive decline at a rapid pace. So some of the conversations I'm having are around human-centered AI, and what does that mean? Other conversations I'm having are around AI implementation in organizations is failing at a very high level. And I think that the companies that understand how to use it and leverage it for strategy across an organization will be more successful than those who aren't. But this is like any other technology. So anytime you bring a new technology into an organization, the success rate of effectively implementing that is like less than 40%. And there's real stats out there. I'm just kind of sharing like old school change management. The MIT, there was a recent MIT study though that said it was like, I don't know, some 85 to 95% of all AI implementations failing. Well, I was talking to a COO this past week, and he was telling me that he loves it. It's making him more organized. And he's like, all the folks in his company are, a lot of them, not all of them, but many of them are using it, and it's making them more effective with their time. I don't think that that's the intent necessarily. Like, that's great. And if it is just a tool for that, then I think we don't need to be afraid of our cognitive decline here. The reality is it's not. People are using it to get more information sent to them without, at a faster pace, and not actually processing then that information and making decisions from it. And then at the end of the day, the COO shouldn't be using this necessarily just for himself. He should be looking at how are we using this across the organization to make us a to give us more of a competitive advantage. And I'm not sure that many organizations are doing that. Now, where does this come into play with complexity in modern day? In actually going back to where philosophy actually comes into all this is part of it is Aristotle. When we get into book six, I mean, Aristotle talks about slowing down to gain wisdom and to make meaning and sense of the things around you so that you're not just reactionary all the time, right? So we have a real opportunity as leaders, as humans, to start to ask the big questions like, what is happiness? What is a good life? Like, these are the core of what we're talking about with the great conversation, is what is a good life, right? And I think that at a societal level, leadership really needs to step up. I don't think that there are leaders stepping up, and yet when it comes to AI, it, moral AI or ethical AI, there needs to be some level of slowing down to say, just exactly how do we want to use this, right? The Pope just came out with a manifesto a couple weeks ago on this, basically saying that there needs to be some boundaries around this. And one of the co-founders of Anthropic, I think, was there, agreeing with him. And so if in my thinking is if we slow down to actually say to with the foundation of what does it mean to be human, I think that a lot of these questions around in the grounding of the great conversations come into this, where like AI, I was just on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, shrinks wrap, and I was basically saying that the manager might die, right? The death of a manager, that might happen. You don't need AI can replace that, but like leadership is fundamentally human. And what does that mean though? And so we have an opportunity. Like, does that mean that everyone should be if education needs to increase, expand, change, evolve, is the fundamentals of education, like higher education, actually coming back to the great conversations, coming back to philosophy and grounding people in what does it mean to be a moral, ethical person who has um, the core virtues and that they're living by that and directing their lives by that. Because I think what we're going to find is that work is going to change and how you make money is going to change and how you spend your time is going to change. So what does that mean for us? Does that mean more TV, more screen time? I'll stop talking. That was quite a rant.
That was great. Yeah, you summed up the problem really well. Yeah, at the fundamental level, this is a competition between our intelligence and an intelligence that is outside of us. And I find folks are in two camps. There's a camp that has accepted the fact that intelligence, the foremost expression of intelligence, is going to be silicon based or whatever be the other future state of the material which is going to contain this. And it's not going to be organic, or maybe there's a combination of organic and silicon, I don't know, but at least it's not going to come from the side of a human. And then there's another camp that doesn't believe that to be the case and believe that intelligence will continue to remain human. And now, I don't know necessarily these two camps what they truly believe in. Now, what I mean to say is that what you tell somebody is different from the conversation you have inside with your own self. It's very hard to know for sure what the other person actually believes. The only person who knows what I actually believe is myself. And that too, if I'm a rational being, if I'm a psychotic individual, even I don't think I have the ability to introspect and know what I believe truly, let alone if I'm schizophrenic or whatever else. Now, if first of all, if I believe these that folks are rational folks and they're having these, that their internal monologue is not available for me, that the reason why that creates a problem is obvious, is because we say things sometimes so that stock prices are not affected, so that the tenor of the conversation inside the company or outside of the company follows a certain line and it's not impacted. Our customers, our stakeholders, internal and external, are not impacted adversely. So things are said, and that may not necessarily be in line with what we believe. And sometimes even what we believe changes on a day-to-day basis. Some days you're optimistic about a certain thing, some days one is pessimistic about a certain thing. Humans, a lot of us do fall back on our feelings, and so it's very hard to know. Having said that, that's the problem with being a social animal. I mean, whether AI is going to achieve the state of general intelligence that's going to be akin to what happens inside of our brains and then supersedes it in the future or not, it's not in my control. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely not in any one individual's control. It may happen, it may not happen, right? Look, you and me didn't sit one day and said, wouldn't it be great if we had social media, if we had a way for us to kind of connect with 500 random individuals and share photos and make them feel terrible about the life that they they seem to not be enjoying.
Yeah.
Or we'll create these 10-second videos of influencers, and that's going to be the dominant way that we're going to consume content. When Socrates was famously against reading books. He thought that reading books is consuming knowledge without having an intermediary, without having a discussion, without having a discourse. And he wanted people to meet and discuss important things rather than sit in a room somewhere and read. Because it turns out for the longest time, publishing books or publishing pamphlets, these are the ways to get to incite revolutions, right? And so that printing was the social media of its time in a way. It's just now we cannot think of it that way. We don't have the stamina to read. As a matter of fact, I prefer somebody read something than just watch a 10-minute YouTube video on something. And so where I was going with this was, number one, these kind of technological changes have happened before. We just don't think of them as technological changes. Like the locomotive engine was akin to time travel, quite frankly. So was telegrams. And I remember there was a time when we had pagers, and I thought that was, that was the frontier of technology. And faxing, right? I mean, all of these things have revolutionized communication and brought the world to a pinpoint, quite frankly. So technology has always existed, and we have used this technology with the intent that it's going to make the world a better place. But I don't think fax made the world a better place. Paging didn't make the world a better place. I think books is probably arguable, but probably books did in a big way brought education to a lot of people, made education more social, more democratic, and also allowed for ideas to spread far beyond the reach of the individual. Like the fact that we know Socrates exists is because Plato's works survived, simply put. So, yes, there's definite benefit to that. But for every book, like the Platonic works and the Bhagavad Gita, there are scores of books that have not added an iota to the human condition in any way, shape, or form. And I would be not surprised if it turns out that the ones that actually been consequential to the advancement of the human race, a mere drop in the ocean of all the slop that probably exists in books. And the
Absolutely.
same thing is true for research. Same thing is true for science. Same thing is true for technology. The stuff that really moves the needle is but a drop in the bucket. And I don't hold the iPhone to be in that drop. It is in the slop category that I put it.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I'm not really sure about AI just yet. I don't think that it is in the drop either. I think it's in the slop bucket, at least so far.
Yeah.
And so now again, I, I am in the same boat as my uh, interlocutors, because I cannot tell what's going on in someone's mind when someone says that they believe AI is slop. I don't know if they truly believe that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so similarly, nobody truly know what I say to myself. I can tell you that there are times when it has amazed me, but I have spent time trying to understand how it works, right? How generative AI works, and the reason I did that was not because I am someone who was interested in technology. As a matter of fact, I was quite a Luddite. Like I never learned coding, and I had no idea how from the internet to blockchain technology. I had no idea how any of this works. I don't know how my mobile phone works. But when it came to AI, back about 2 years ago, I remember you and me had a conversation about it too. There was a time when I was scared of it. I didn't know what to make of it, and because of the claims that people were making around me, and I really spent the last 2 years learning about as much as I could about it. And a lot of my learning of AI has come from the fact that things like books, things like the internet, things like the iPhone exist. That's why I've been able to get. There's been a democratization of knowledge in a way. So yes, all of these technologies, if used the right way, can make us way better than we could if these technologies didn't exist. I have no business in knowing how generative AI works, and about deep neural networks and what the architecture of it and how it learns. I have no business knowing this. But
Mm-hmm.
if not for the democratization, if not for the technologies that exist, I wouldn't still know. And it has made me a sharper individual. But it, by the way, it also allayed my fears about it, right? About the technology. I've come to accept the technology for what it is. I know its flaws. I know the problems that exist. Having said that, I don't know where it's going to go. It's
Yeah.
obviously in the few short years that I started reading about it, there's obviously been progress, but I understand the limitations of the technology in and of itself. But there are dangerous things that it can do, because even the technology that it operates under is, though flawed, that technology is the underpinning of our modern society. I think there are parts of India, and there are parts of Africa, and there are parts of Asia, in other parts in Asia, where even if there is these modern systems fail, life will go on, and they wouldn't even know the difference.
Right.
And
Right.
and in those places, there is sorrow, there is suffering, there is also happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that you need technology in order to be happy. Yes, there is some misery that technology does decrease in a big way. Simply put, hand hygiene, I would call that technology. Soap is a technology, quite frankly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Antibiotics is technology, quite frankly. Vaccinations are technology. I think these things have kind of revolutionized the world, changed who we are, many ways, shape, or form. And I would count that way ahead of things like artificial intelligence and things. Now, what I hear is, oh, because of artificial intelligence, we'll be able to develop medicines that we have never thought of before. I've not seen it yet. There
Right.
is some stuff that's happening in Google DeepMind related to protein folding. It understands protein folding better than we do. But I mean, those things are marginal at this point,
Yeah.
right? And it may change in the next maybe 10, 15, 20 years. Maybe there's going to be a system by which, just give me a second. There may be a system by which, these things will lead to longevity or will cure cancer, and all of those things may be true. I don't know if that necessarily add to happiness, because in order for it to become that drop in the bucket as opposed to being slop, the 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 odds are stacked against this technology.
Mhm.
Like, I haven't seen anything really truly groundbreaking, quite frankly, and it's not for the lack of trying. And I'm not the only one. I think everybody talks about this. The reason why everybody's worried about the AI bubble is because, like you said, the Stanford study, 50% of the folks who have used the technology as it exists thus far, that's the caveat, have not necessarily seen some big gains in either productivity or innovation or any of that, right?
Yeah.
So I I feel that there are, whether this technology changes the world or not, I think there's another understanding that one needs to have is that human happiness doesn't quite rest so much on these technologies. Like, we were happy before the iPhone was created. Someone created the iPhone and fooled us into believing that that is what will lead to happiness. That social media, someone fooled us that social media is our ticket to happiness.
Yeah.
And someone is fooling us that artificial intelligence is our ticket to happiness. Universal basic income, you won't have to worry about where your money comes from, everybody can be artists. You know, these are the ramblings of a simple mind that is trying to resolve, world changing, potentially world changing, actually I should take that back, potentially very profitable endeavors.
Hmm.
Like, you wouldn't let Steve Jobs run your social development program, right? I mean, if Steve Jobs wrote a book on philosophy about, what is it to lead a good life, you wouldn't read it.
No, he didn't know.
That's what I
Yeah,
mean.
he was almost, it was almost like a curse of like his
That's right.
obsession. Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah.
do you think these guys, like, what's his name, Sam Altman and Amadei, I think his name is, do you think they know?
No.
And all those psychologists and all the folks that they're employing, do you think they know? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna pass it back to you.
Yeah. There's so much there. I mean, one, technology doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to convenience. But but happiness, actually, it's the opposite. It's led to increased depression, anxiety, suicide rates. Yeah, I mean, social media is kind of a nightmare in terms of that. I mean, I was driving back from LA last night. I took my younger son and his friend to a concert up there, and we were talking about reading books and he's like, "Yeah, I just don't read." I'm like, "There's a problem with that." He goes, "Well, I get my information in other ways." I'm like, "Exactly. Like, and maybe you need to do both, or just sit down and read a book because it requires you to use it requires you to function differently to do that." Um, a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, a couple episodes ago in resiliency rounds, we used we were talking about the moral question of, if your wife is or spouse is dying and you can break into a drugstore, would you go and get the drugs because the drugs will save your wife's life, but you're breaking the law, right? And this idea of a drop in a bucket got me thinking as we were talking about this. So AI might cure cancer. That is a significant contribution to humanity. It's also a drop in the bucket. At what cost? So we cure cancer. but cognitive development is impacted for centuries to come. That we might have the cure for cancer, but no one's going to be smart enough in 100 years to do anything with it because we're all going to be drinking Gatorade instead of water and thinking that processed foods is how we live a long life, right? So because we're just going to become, well, everyone will be, the idea of idiocracy is coming into play, and so I find it, that's the weight of this is, can't we just, you could we slow down and use it for good and put it into places where it will benefit? But let's not just say it's the answer for everything, and that everyone should, like, we all have access to it now. I mean, there's part of this humanity and in AI summit that I went to is about, like, it should be democratized. Like, no one person should have power over what can be the outcomes of AI. Kind of like Wiki, like the challenges of Wikipedia, of everyone going in and defining their own page of what was said in Nicomachean Ethics. Like, you're going to get a lot of different answers there, right? And AI is only as good as the information that it gets and is able to pull and is fed, right? So there's a lot of BS out there too that it might pull. And I think that there are some like there's some guardrails. I think what I'm suggesting is there needs to be clarity on what those guardrails are. Um, and it needs to be on a global scale, not just country by country.
Yeah. You know, the question about if it cures cancer and leads to cognitive decline, these claims that it can cure cancer are not as well founded as the observation that it will lead to cognitive decline.
Yeah.
So I'll give you, and we've probably seen this ourselves in our lives, and I'll give you an example of what that looks like, right? Like, social media was supposed to cure social isolation.
Right.
I don't need to even complete that statement.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you the other thing. Um, when is the last time, Jeremy, and this is coming from a personal example. So, when is the last time you took a drive and just enjoyed the drive?
So I'm good at this though, so I might not be your average person.
Well, then great. Then you and me both have an example. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, like I'm just trying to think about my week, but it was Friday.
yeah,
What day is it today?
fantastic. So,
Sunday. Yeah. Yeah.
great. Tell me a little bit about that drive. What was great about it?
Yeah, so I was all the way downtown for a meeting, and I know that there's traffic coming up the five, and so I was like, I'm taking the coast. I'm going to take a nice slow drive down the coast. I'm not going to hurry. I'm not going to be frustrated with traffic. I'm just going to look at the ocean and enjoy the fact that I'm in Southern California.
Did you have your GPS on?
Nope.
That what I was trying to get at is that's the key. So we took a trip down Route 66. So we went west from Oklahoma City into New Mexico and came back. And we did it the old fashioned way. We took going up. So I'll tell you two. Sorry, I take that back. So going up, I tried to program my GPS, Google Maps, to see if I can take the old Route 66. A lot of it is basically I-40 now. And we kept missing everything. I was like, this is not what we're supposed to do. So we started deliberately getting off the I-40, going into these towns and coming out, and then finding ourselves back on I-40 somehow. When we made it to, we stopped in Tucumcari, that's just the right in as you hit New Mexico. And it is a town that it's like Radiator Springs from Cars. The
Yeah.
I-40 bypassed it, and the town is just dying. But what a spirit, man! These guys were they were these motels, the old timey motels, right? There was not a single branded motel in there. Like the Blue Swallow Motel is very popular. They were booked, by the way. And
Mm.
there was a motel ahead of that called the Roadrunner Motel. So we stayed there the night, spent the night at the motel. I've It's been so long since I've had like genuine conversations with really salt of the earth people. real conversations, not rushed. You're sitting there and you're talking and you're talking and you're talking, and they're hugging you. They're sweet to your kids, and they're having these beautiful conversations. And the town, you could see the town was like, it was decaying, but there were
Mm.
these people who was trying to put up a fight, and most of the people who were traveling through were folks who were frequenting these motels and stuff, or folks whose parents, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, they took them down Route 66 and they were reliving that with their grandkids, right? Small restaurants, you can't imagine how cost effective they were, how great the food was, how nice the people were. But on the way back, so when we were there, one of the rooms in the motel, there was a couple who was driving Route 66. They actually were making the whole trip from Chicago to LA and back, or or were they making maybe from LA to Chicago? I'm sorry, but they had a book with them, and the book is actually written by this guy who goes down Route 66 almost a couple of times a year, and if there's any modification in there, he puts it down. So it's just like an old timey book, spiral bound. And she said, "You need to get this book and buy the latest edition." So we said, "Great." So we bought the latest edition, and we decided that we are not going to put the GPS on. We're going to follow the maps in the book. And it took us by the old Route 66. Oh, the drive was beautiful. We were not paying attention to the GPS. We got lost a couple of times. We had to backtrack, make it. And it took us to parts that we would have otherwise not gone, small towns, small cafes, had beautiful conversations. And it was it was about 560 miles one way,
Mm.
and it was the best driving experience I've had in the US thus far.
Oh, it's amazing.
Right?
Hey,
I take my car and I go drive just for the heck of driving and come back. But this was just so different.
yeah,
And what I was trying to get at essentially is the GPS was created and put in everybody's car so that you never have to get lost again. You will explore places. You'll be confident when you get there and you'll get back and all of those things. And what has it done to travel?
yeah. Wow.
I think
No.
AI is kind of like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it may solve. Yeah, I don't know if it'll solve for cancer. It'll definitely make a PowerPoint presentation for you, and without you having to do it. But what are you leaving in the process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I've driven cross country 3 times. I think the last time was probably using GPS. It was very quick, but the first 2 times I used triptychs. You go to AAA and they highlight what roads you're going to take. Did we get lost? Absolutely. But think about going back and saying it's actually getting back to I'm hungry. We should start looking for a place to eat. And then you start to figure out like you're not looking at your phone to say closest food near me or restaurant near me. You're exploring and you end up then, I mean, you'll still explore, I guess, if you're looking up restaurants near you, but to truly just you're not looking at reviews, you're not looking at anything. You just show up. Some are good, some are bad, but all of it is experience. And it
Oh,
gets to the core of all of it, man, which is you what we want to talk about like what is life? Like what is happiness? What is a good life? It's actually experiencing life. And it's not having something experience it for you.
or reading someone else's reviews and
Right.
thinking that your tastes are going to be exactly like that person's taste.
Right.
This whole 3-star, 4-star, 5-star business on Google has just completely destroyed our ability to try something out or give a
Mhm.
business a chance, give a human being a chance. Yes, I really don't think that whatever this technology is, whatever it is, I think if there is something to learn from this is that we have done this before. We've been down this path before. It does not add to happiness at a human level. It does not.
Mhm.
Yes, there are things that it can do, no question. There is certain amount of convenience that it can solve for, but there is no ticket that it cuts to happiness. People have been happy before the locomotive. Be
Mhm.
happiness, and they've been happy people post locomotive, and there've been a lot of sad people post locomotive too.
Yeah.
I think we need to stop paying attention to people who say that convenience is your way to happiness.
Yeah. It and so I think this kind of segues into some of the conversations I've been having recently, where my work is evolving, right? So like my background, I really like my practices. We have like a leadership advisory, right? We come in and work at all levels of a leadership or of an organization, helping from CEOs down to first line supervisors and leaders to really understand what leadership is, how to be a better leader and everything. And it's about expanding your perspective and making sense of complexity, right? So you should be driving complexity up to higher levels of seniority in the organization. That should be senior level roles who are managing complexity and then pushing decision making down. Like that's kind of the work we've been doing. But I work a lot with one-on-one with leaders, and in the last few months, what I'm seeing is that I'm getting referrals to people who have been in every way successful. And they're usually in their 40s, maybe early 50s. And they're all at these points where they're starting to question. And I guess this is the midlife crisis, maybe, right? But and this is how we started talking too a few years ago. Like where these folks are saying, I some of them have been extremely successful and can retire now, but they're in their 40s. Like what they don't necessarily want to retire. Uh, but they also might have started a family later in life because they were so committed to their work for so many years. So they start to question themselves, their actions, their choices, and saying, well, they're at these inflection points. They're transitions. It's either career transitions, life transitions, or they're actually trying to transform to be a better human. And and they're looking for guidance on that. And that can be, and so a lot of the work like founded in philosophy and psychology and spirituality, all three of those come into starting to answer those where they're at, which is really by asking questions and reflecting on, the first question I actually ask them is, well, how do you define a good life? One of the second questions I ask is, what do you value? And actually, in the conversation just on Friday, I'm shifting that now to what do you find valuable? Because we all actually share these core values that we've been told. Like core values are actually morally, like those are morals, right? So values and morals are, I think, very similar. And so we actually say, well, what is valuable? So I'm talking to men in their 40s who say, well, I don't need to work anymore. I've got young kids, and they've been saying I value my family, I value my friends. And if they truly value that, then why are they asking what's next in their career? Because they don't need to work anymore. So they find family time valuable. They find connection with others valuable. They also find having a challenge valuable, having something that they can put their name on valuable. So it's okay. That's okay. There's no judgment there. It's all about you just need let's be honest with your value, it's not your values here. It's how do you really what do you want to do and how do you want to spend your time? What do you find valuable for the use of your time? And where does your ego come into play with all this too? Because of course, with great success, you just want more and more and more of that. That is not what's going to lead you to happiness, though. And if you look at you're on your deathbed and you're saying, "Well, I succeeded in becoming a trillionaire." Okay, well, where's that money? Like, are you using that money for good? Because if not, like, then what's the point? To just accumulate? So these are the types of questions and conversations I'm having with actually people who are coming and paying for a different type of coaching. I don't call it life coaching, but I'm calling it like human potential and saying like some of it's soul searching. I'm not that's not my thing, but there are so many people out there, I think, in these transitional times right now. And as you see, I one of the conversations that I'll stop talking is this gentleman has been so successful. He's in the Bay Area, if he takes 10 years off to raise his kids, he feels like he will no longer be of value. And like now is his time. People know him. He has these great successes. And I had to I mean I kind of pointed out that like that might be true. However, like the value you brought to be successful in the roles you were in were skills that are like you were clearly a good leader. You built teams. You understand how to find talent. Like that doesn't change, right? Like you still have that as core competencies that you can take with you 10 years from now. You're not going to be stale. Now maybe you're not stale on the latest and greatest AI technologies 10 years from now, but there are things you can do to continue to educate yourself, but not actually be in the thick of it and live a good life. And then choose maybe to say, yeah, maybe I just want to open up a surf shop in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, unfortunately, being human is a pretty complex thing. And it's exponentially harder to simplify one's expectations. And it, as one, as one comes to a situation where like the most simple things can bring the most pleasure, one of two things have to happen. And I haven't really tested this theory out as well, but bear with me here. Either things are just so bad that a glass of water feels like heaven, where you have to be probably, lost in a desert,
Mm-hmm.
and the joy that you would get from drinking that sip of water would probably surpass any other joys that ever existed in the world. And but the amount of pain that you have to go through to get to that point of simple happiness coming from the most simple things. But the other way of looking at it is that immense progress and wisdom could get you there too. Now that's another journey. That's also a journey of hardship and pain, a little bit different than getting lost in a desert. I feel that one does get lost in a desert and makes it. I think there's a lot of profound thought, knowledge, or wisdom that one would gain from that experience, but there's a lot of price to pay for that. But I think there's another way to go through life and still come to those points of profound wisdom. And I believe that once one gains that kind of wisdom, as one is walking towards, I think one's life simplifies itself. These conversations how about how does one be happy? What's eudaimonia? The Aristotelian definition of a happy life is a pretty complex definition.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we are in the thick of Nicomachean ethics, and so we got to give Aristotle his due and agree to his argument that the best life is a life that has all of the good things in it as one can accumulate. That's a very complex life. I think Buddha probably has a different take on that. The Gita has a different take on that. Actually, Socrates probably had a very different take on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally have a different take than Aristotle. I don't believe that happiness is a complex endeavor, human happiness. Now, but I'm also a conventional being. I do realize that I have wrapped my happiness in the pursuit of the common good, and that is a complex endeavor. But the reason for that is not that one would achieve it. It just gives you something to do, and something that one cannot achieve ever. You just keep pursuing it. And so these conversations that you're having with your with potential clients, folks who are having these conversations with you, I mean, they're thinking about it the right way. Like the whatever pursuit there is, it has to be a pursuit that one is never going to achieve. There's no achieving it. Like $1 trillion is still not an achievement, because someone could have 1 trillion plus one, and then what does it mean at that point, right? It is something that is unachievable. And then something as objective as money is not what we are talking about here. But whatever the common good is in whatever field that you are in, there are unachievable goals, but you keep walking toward it and trying to make the world a better place. But understanding that you're not going to hit it, and also keeping your life simple at the same time.
Hmm.
Because if one wants to drive a Ferrari on their way to their not for profit and drop their kids off at a private school, right? And also have a six pack to boot. Like these are all things that add complexity, and one will come in the way of the other. I can tell you, quite frankly, a Ferrari comes in the way of the common good,
Yeah.
right? And so I feel like the wise man, though not simple in the sense that, or woman, though not simple in the sense that they are roughshod, live in a modest house and have nothing to do with the world. I believe it's contrary to that. I think they could be they could be living right next door to you, but will have a sense of simplicity when it comes to their sense of happiness.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that if you can live in in Carlsbad, San Diego, or that you have now stepped away from the simple life, because you don't have to live in impecunious conditions just to show that you don't care about these things. That becomes a perversion of what I'm trying to say. It is understanding that that is not the way that you get happy, but
Hmm.
choosing to sleep in a soft bed doesn't rob you of happiness or doesn't rob you of the exalted state of wisdom either, right? If a bed is soft, choose it. You don't have to sleep on a hard bed. Like if the chair is uncomfortable, get out of it. You don't have to suffer silently.
Yeah.
There is no real there's no award for suffering silently. One should enjoy life, but one should understand that happiness doesn't come from that. One should be very simple in their, when I say should, I mean this is what I've heard, right? I mean, I'm no one to give anybody any advice here. This is what I've heard: is that happiness should be simple. That the simple man is a woman is has found happiness. If they understand that, before that is the complex task of wisdom, and that complex task of wisdom could be like getting lost in a desert or actually choosing to learn from the examples of others. And that is the reason to read. That's the reason to have good conversations. Turn off your GPS at times. Not use Claude. Have a conversation with your neighbor. Feel the poignancy of people who've been left behind by technology. Like Tucumcari, New Mexico, is a living, breathing example of what happens when an interstate bypasses you or an artificial intelligence bypasses your worth.
Yeah.
There's something deeply human about that.
Yes.
And
I
understanding that, I think, is our way to move forward.
totally agree. Um, yeah, the idea of simplicity. You use a couple words in there, and I think actually that removing those words or understanding that those words are part of the chase versus actually like happiness, assigning happiness to anything is a
Yeah.
false narrative, right? Like if I had this, I'd be happy. If I can just get to that, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
The-
Yeah.
Happiness never arrives. Happiness in where you find happiness is in the moment, being truly present.
Hmm.
And therefore your word simplicity really resonates with me because it is nothing more than that. And
Hmm.
happiness, of course, can come and go, but it comes and goes because of our cognitive intellectual thought process that is driving us in thinking about other things, thinking about what other people are thinking about what other people have, thinking about I need this or I need to do more of X or Y and why haven't I accomplished this? And it's our cognition that's truly driving our unhappiness instead of just being truly present in the moment right now. And there's plenty of, I mean, this gets more into the spiritual stuff, right? I mean, that's it's like Ram Dass, I think, is be here now, right? And that's not for everyone, but the concept of like intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically, and I've come to the decision that I made a lot of bad choices in my life, chasing all the wrong things, coming into being close to nearing 50. I've decided I like nice cars. Okay, it's not going to make me happy. I'm not assigning happiness to it. I also not saying I can afford nice cars. I'm just acknowledging it's something that I like. If I'm driving one, great. If I'm not, it's not going to make me happy or unhappy. There's a lot of things like this is a white privilege thing I just said. Just to be clear, right? Like how many people in the world don't get to even lots of people like nice cars, right? Like actually driving one is something that most people don't get to do. But this idea of like, and that's the whole idea of what I mentioned, slowing down. Like, how are you going to find happiness if you're constantly racing? And well, we've talked about this before. You may never arrive at happiness, right? I mean, it's you're on a path to a good life. You're on a path to a virtuous life. You're on a path to happiness. But who's to say you ever arrive? But if you're not fully present in the moment, you'll never know. That,
Absolutely, man. I think it's a good place to stop. But this, we used AI as an inflection point. I think we humans are always at some sort of an inflection point. I mean, change is the only constant there is. But the folks who remain grounded through change come to understand the fact that you just stated there. You just have to be in the moment. There's every moment there's change. They say, I think this, I forget who said it. Was it one of the ancient Greeks, Parmenides or somebody? He said, no man enters the same river twice. The man is changed and the river is changed. So that's just how our life is. And just even understanding that is wisdom. We try to hold on to things the way they are. They're not going to stay that way. Like Route 66, the only reason why driving down it means something is because it has changed. It's something else has taken its place and it's decaying and rotting and moving away. And one could try their best to hold on to it, and that's fine. But wisdom is in the fact that that's going to go away. And so being present right now, this moment, is where happiness lies. Even that cannot be controlled. But I think this is
that's
a
right.
good place to probably end this. And then next time we meet, we'll talk about wisdom. A lot of practical wisdom of Phronesis was discussed today, but not done through Aristotelian lens. But that's what it's about. It's about having incomplete knowledge, but despite having incomplete knowledge, being able to make the next best decision. That is how what I personally believe is Phronesis. We see what Nicomachean Ethics has to say about that.
Yeah, I look forward to talking about it.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you.